Hello, everyone. It is Fiona here from FionaMarks.com, and I am back with Fernando. Fernando, can you introduce yourself to everyone?
Hello, my name is Fernando Raul, and I try to be an astrologer. Thank you very much, Fiona, for being the host and having me here in your wonderful channel.
Well, I love having you here in my channel, Fernando, because we talk about, well, at the moment, what we're talking about is some preconceptions or ideas that people have about Vedic astrology that perhaps we can shed light on, we can bring some context to. So we're sort of busting some myths. And I really enjoy learning about Vedic astrology and traditional astrology through our conversations. And today is no different because we are working our way through your video for the Asheville Vedic Astrology Apprenticeship Program. And today we're going to talk about retrograde planets and how they are treated differently. Maybe this is more differently between modern astrology and Vedic astrology, perhaps, although you can tell me more about it. And this one I feel like I can contribute very little to because I don't know much about modern astrology. So as a completely unaware, just general human being, I occasionally see in my newspaper feed Mercury retrograde, and I noticed that there's always an article about that. So I get the sense that retrograde is something that we should all be very concerned about. And whereas in Vedic astrology, for example, I know that when a planet is retrograde, it gets more Chesta Bala, and often we would associate that as the person being more confident in their use of that planet.
Exactly.
So tell us a little bit about retrograde in different astrologies.
Okay. This point stems from the idea that retrogression, in my opinion, has three specific interpretations.
Okay,
One
great.
in Vedic astrology,
Yep.
one in traditional non-Vedic astrology, and one in modern astrology.
Okay.
And they more or less relate to each other. But firstly, we must define retrogradation.
Yes.
Because retrogradation is not a purely astrological phenomenon. It is an astronomical phenomenon. You
Correct.
see, astrology is done geocentrically. So from the traditional Aristotelian geocentric model, you will
Yes.
have the Earth and you have the different spheres, right?
Yes.
So all the planets are going around the Earth, right? But there comes a moment when some planets, specifically the Tara Grahas,
Okay.
Mercury, Venus, Mars, Saturn, and Jupiter, right?
Yep.
They will go backwards. Now, the retrogradations for Mercury and Venus are different to the retrogradations of Jupiter, Mars, and Saturn because Mercury and Venus are inferior planets or interior planets, while Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn are exterior or superior planets. So there are two types of models for the retrogradation, which we're not going to get into because it's a little bit complicated and long winded, so we're not going to get there. But the idea is that only these 5 planets go retrograde. The moon does not go retrograde. The sun does not go retrograde. Do not do that mistake, okay? So the idea is that when a planet goes retrograde, there is an optical illusion where the planet from the geocentric point of view goes backward.
Yep.
Okay. So that entails an astrological signification, right?
Yes.
That means something in astrology.
Yeah.
And different planets go retrograde at different moments. Mercury specifically is the planet that goes retrograde the most. That is why we hear a lot about Mercury retrograde, because it is very convenient to have Mercury go retrograde at least 3 or 4 times a year. So you at least 3 or 4 times a year can talk about astrology, sell your products, sell your consultations, and all that. Okay. Venus is a little longer, Mars a little longer, and Jupiter and Saturn. And as I said, Venus and Mercury have specific guidelines for retrogradation, and the superior planets have others. Now, what is the meaning of retrogradation from the traditional perspective? Well, retrogradation is not good.
Okay.
Retrogradation is seen as a malefic essential dignity component. Why? Because the planet is going backwards, right? You're going back. You're retrieving. You're going backwards.
Yes.
So you're not going forwards, right? Life goes forward. Life does not go backward. That's why you can have nostalgia, right? And you
Yeah.
can't go very far ahead because then you're going to have stress. But the thing is that you got to live in the present and go forwards. And the
Okay.
idea of retrogradation is the idea of a planet going backwards. And from the traditional perspective, it was a rebellious planet, rebel.
Yep.
It was a planet that was non-conformist, and it was a planet that would cause difficulties.
Okay.
Now, it is very important to know if it's retrograde, if it's direct retrograde or
Yep.
retrograde direct. The
Yep.
idea that it just started going retrograde or it's about to stop going retrograde, because that also has a precise distinction. Because if it's retrograde going to direct, it is not as bad as direct going retrograde. Okay.
Okay.
So you have to take this into consideration, look at the dignity of the planet, the significations of the planet. But in essence, it was bad. But it was not the only bad thing. There were other stuff that were bad. Essential dignity in terms of what dignity and what sign the planet was, the relationship to the sun, right? If it was combust under the rays, if it was eastward or westward, conjunctions with other planets, aspects with other planets, benefics, malefics. So retrogradation within the traditional perspective was bad, but it was associated to other stuff. And why was it bad? Because you were going backwards. You were rebellious. You were nonconformist, right? You were going to be a fighter, not a lover, right? There's going to be difficulty, friction, okay? And the idea of retrogradation is the idea of doing things that you already did.
Yeah.
This is why in modern astrology, some people say that retrograde planets show some sort of past life regrets or something like that because you're going back, but that is very purely modern. Now, that is the traditional definition of astrology, of retrogradation from an astrological point of view for non-Vedic astrologies. Now,
Okay.
in Vedic astrology, you have this idea of Chesta Bala,
Yes.
which is the force of movement,
yes.
which alludes to the idea that when a planet is retrograde, it is stronger in Chesta Bala as part of the Chesta Bala calculations because the planet is more confident. Why? Because astronomically speaking, when planets are retrograde, they are closer to the Earth.
Okay.
Right? This is the main idea.
Yes.
So as a consequence, then planets are going to be more secure in themselves. They're going to
Yes.
be more they're going to be stronger in that sense, being more secure,
Yeah.
right? But as you can see, it's not seen as bad necessarily. It's seen as something positive. But if you can reconcile both ideas, you can come up with the idea that I've come up, right? Retrogradation
Yes.
is bad because you're rebellious, because you're nonconformist, you're a fighter, not a lover. And with Chesta Bala, you're very secure, right? So if you're very secure, you're going to be rebellious, right?
Yep.
If you're very secure, you're going to be nonconformist. If you're going to be, a fighter, then you're going to be tenacious. So as you can see, you can have harmony within those situations,
Yep.
which, retrogradation, as you can see, has like a special Mars character to it. I wouldn't say that, but just as an analogy,
yes.
but it has that idea of being malefic in that sense. But you can more or less reconcile both perspectives
Yep.
of the Vedic and non-Vedic traditional astrologies. The idea that the force of movement is there, then hence you're going to be more confident. Now that might bring problems. You're going to be rebellious. You're going to be nonconformist. What things we should look to see if this is going to be good or bad? The things I told you. Dignity, relation to the sun, eastward, westward, conjunctions, aspects, malefics, benefics, sect, time periods. Those are gonna be the things that are gonna check if that planet is gonna do good or bad. Because then you have the idea that also creates a lot of confusion in Vedic astrology, the idea of what happens when you have a retrograde planet exalted. Right?
Yes.
If a planet is exalted, a planet is exalted. Point. There is no cancellation. As I said before, there is no complete cancellation ever.
Yeah.
So you got to mix those things together.
Yep.
The idea of being secure, rebellious within that exalted status that is going to give you a lot of good things. So maybe some sort of notoriety within a lot of success. I don't know, something like that. That's a case specific thing that we have to see chart by chart.
Yeah.
So there you have the two definitions for
Okay.
non-Vedic traditional astrology and Vedic astrology. But there's another definition,
Yes.
the definition that has become very popular, which is the modern astrology definition. Because one of the things that distinguishes modern astrology from traditional astrology is that there's nothing good, there's nothing bad, everything is gray. There is a shadow side to a planet, there's a light side to the planet. Malefics are not necessarily malefics, they're teachers. Benefics are not necessarily benefics, they're just, convenient, that sort of thing. Not to criticize that, but that is not traditional astrology. So what happens? As you know, life is not always peaches and cream. It's not always sex and ice cream. There are difficulties in life, death, sickness, enemies, obstacles. So, modern astrology has to come up with something that will create that negativity, right? It has to come up with a characteristic that will entail difficulties. And there you have the idea of retrogradation. We'll take that from the traditional context, which once again was negative, but what's one negative of a lot of other negatives,
Yeah.
right? But you also have to see the context because, like, for example, in horaries or prashnas that I have understood, when you have a prime significated retrograde, it's really bad. It's
Okay.
even worse than in natal, but that's horary, not natal. But the thing is that in coming back in modern astrology, retrogradation is seen as really bad. Why? Because there's not a lot of things in modern astrology that can be distinguished as bad. And there you have the idea of retrogradation being really bad. The idea that I told you about Mercury retrograde, it goes at least 3 times a year retrograde. So you have 3 opportunities to sell your consultation, sell your newspaper, sell your magazines, and all that. So that would be the third idea of retrogradation, this exaggeration of its negativity. Because as you know, retrogradation is not always going to affect you. There are certain things that you have to look for. In my experience, your solar returns, what perfection you're going through. Because if you're going through a perfection and there is a retrograde planet in transit, and that retrograde planet is hitting specific points, both in the perfection and in the natal chart at the same time, there are going to be difficulties. For example, I recently came up, I'm on a Scorpio perfection 12th house.
Okay.
Mars just went retrograde in Aquarius. It forms a square to that Scorpio, right? But it formed a perfect square with my sun and with my moon and other planets in Aquarius and Scorpio. And I was going through a 12th house progression. I got sick. I got an injury. And after Mercury stopped being retrograde, I got better. So, this is an idea of how retrogradation can affect you, but you have to see certain things that will apply differently to different people depending on their charts. So next time you see a retrograde planet, remember, one, from the traditional perspective, is not that bad, but it's still bad, but it's not that bad, okay? But it's bad, okay? And you have to see different characteristics to determine how that thing is going to go. And number two, don't get carried away with the third definition of retrogradation because it's just mainly smoke and mirrors, and it's part of the modern astrological propaganda machine.
Yep. So don't freak out if in your natal birth chart you see retrograde next to one of your planets. Now, what I like, one of the images that I like about what you're sharing is, I imagine, like when you get that stick and you're turning the water in the bucket, and everything's going in the same direction and you get a really good like whirlpool or whatever going. And then retrograde is like when you stop the stick and you go in the other direction.
I'm gonna use that. That's great.
There you go. It's giving and sharing here, Fernando. And so you get that turmoil when things go backwards, but it can be obviously very cleansing, right? That's when things come up and, like there's a lot of benefit when we think about how water is cleaned on the planet. All of this churning that happens with water is actually how, toxins get expelled and stuff. So I like that imagery of thinking that things go backwards and, like you said, rebellious. But I do want to highlight that, of course, in the sky, they're not going backwards at all, like in real life.
Correct. Excellent.
So,
it's an optical illusion.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we have to remember that it's our limited perspective on Earth that may see that they're going backwards. And that's a perception thing. So we need to also be open that astrology is by definition bigger than our own consciousness, so we have to be open to those things. And I also, I like what you said about Chesta Bala, that there's a confidence when a planet is covering ground that it's already covered. That's where it knows what it's doing. And am I right that all retrograde planets, if they're in the night sky and we can see them, they're brighter? Right?
Yes.
Because their rays are, we're
Yes.
having that double kind of effect. So it's they're the brighter planets. They're the more noticeable planets.
Yeah,
so
they're standing out. They're
standing
just
out.
they're not going in line.
Yeah,
They're standing out. They're like a sore
standing out.
thumb.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, or like a gem or whatever. They're standing out. Good or bad. Now, I haven't asked you this question. In a way, it doesn't relate to what we're talking about.
Oh, go ahead. And
another
let's
way
see
it
if
does.
if I can answer it. Yeah.
We always thought this would be a short topic, so now I'm going to string it out. Interestingly, Rahu and Ketu always go backwards.
Yes.
And do they ever go retrograde forwards?
No, but if you use True Node, they stay static for a while.
Stationary sometimes.
Yes,
Yep.
but that is only if you use the True Node. You should
Yep.
use Mean Node because that's the traditional way.
Yep. So already, regardless of planets that occasionally go backwards at their correct times, from our perspective, Rahu and Ketu are always moving backwards through your chart. So they also have that churn kind of energy of.
Oh yeah, they're rebellious. That's why they are the armies, right? Rahu being the foreign army for conquest and Ketu being the local army for defense.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and that's part of the Chayagraha connotations of the dark planets. They're not physical planets. They're just like ghosts. That's why when they get conjunct with other planets, things change.
Yep. So that's a nice segue.
And that's a great point, by the way.
Well, thank you. It's a nice segue into a topic that we're going to do in the future, because one of Fernando's favorite topics is the nodes and how they are currently extremely important and popular. So very soon, Fernando and I will get together.
We haven't talked about that yet? No, we haven't. No,
we're looking forward to it. So we'll be talking about how the nodes are treated differently in different astrologies, and I'm looking forward to that. Fernando, it's great spending time with you. Thanks for clarifying some different ways that Chesta Bala or retrogradation is treated in different astrologies, and I look forward to talking to you next time.
Thank you very much, Fiona. Always a pleasure to share time with you.
Equally. Okay, bye everyone. See you next time.
Ciao.
Bye.